Yves, you're very welcome this evening as you join us here in the Cathedral Hall just beside St Eugene's Cathedral in the city of Derry. We're here for the second of our 4 evening conversations during this Catholic Schools Week, where the theme this year, not surprisingly, is Catholic Schools, Communities of Faith and Resilience. And last night we had Mrs. Joyce Logue, the principal of one of our main city primary schools here, the Long Tower Primary School, very close to St Columbs Church. And this evening we have Mc Connellogue. Mark is head of RE, Religious Education, in the St Columbs College and a member of the senior management team. And I want you to talk to Mark this evening about a couple of aspects of what he's doing, why he's doing it, why it's important to him, and further ongoing formation that he's been involved in over this past couple of years. Mark, you're very welcome.
Thank you, Bishop Donal.
Good.
Yeah.
So you're head of RE.
Yeah.
But I understand you began at university studying psychology. How does somebody get from studying psychology to being head of RE? And probably you'll find there's a close link.
Yeah, well,
in that journey of your own.
Yeah, I think first of all the common denominator is that I have always been interested in people. I'm a people person. I like working with people. I like interacting with people. I'm particularly interested in the human mind and how the mind works. I'm also interested in mental illness, what causes it and how it could be treated. And I think during my studies in psychology, I felt very deeply on quite a number of occasions that there was something missing. In the study of the human person, I think it's more appropriate to take a more holistic approach. And I think that a person's spiritual life is actually a very central part of who we are. And therefore I think that any study of the human person really has to involve that religious or spiritual element. Otherwise, in some way, it's inadequate. And so I think that's why I very naturally actually moved from psychology, which could be argued an atheistic science, into a sphere that, took into consideration the spiritual dimension of the human person, and that, we are a mystery unto ourselves. And that really appealed to me.
And you're suggesting, I guess, from this, that a spiritual life or having spirituality can be a great resource in terms of maintaining a person's mental health and in terms of coping with pandemics, crises of one sort or another, in terms of nourishing resilience, that a healthy spiritual life is an asset, not a drawback.
Absolutely. In fact, I would say it's essential. And I think it comes down to, what one of my favourite writers, Thomas Merton, often says, that the true self can only be found in God, nowhere else. So when we set out on a journey to discover who we truly are, and I think a lot of people, particularly at this time during pandemic, when you have, more time to be on your own, more time to spend in silence, people do look for a more authentic, a more genuine self, and that can be found in God. In fact, I would say God is the only place that can really be found, because with a relationship with God is one of the few places where we can come before God and just be ourselves, with our good points, our not so good points, warts and all, and He accepts us and loves us unconditionally for that. And I think that brings people immense solace and immense mental peace of mind.
Yes, so prayer, therefore, you're suggesting, is not a childish thing, but actually a very adult practice.
Yes.
In terms of becoming a mature person rather than a childish person.
Well, in terms of, prayer being communication with God, or rather, bringing yourself into God's presence and allowing Him to get at you. Because, who are we to reach God? What can we do, to get to God? So it's really about putting ourselves in a position and basically being open to God's grace working in us. And I think that is a very mature and a very adult pursuit and endeavour.
And I presume in your role as head of RE, you'll have some contribution to the spiritual life of the large school where you teach in Columbs College with what, 1,400 teenagers, 1,400 pupils?
Over 1,400 boys, yeah.
I presume the faith dimension to the identity of the school is an important element of how you want to offer that insight and that spirituality to young people.
I would say central. I think the spiritual life of St. Columbs College, is a very vibrant spiritual life. It is something that, the whole community, both teaching staff and non-teaching staff, pupils, parents, our school chaplain, Father Chris Ferguson, it's very much a community effort. And our spirituality from that point of view is absolutely vibrant. And yes, I did have a contribution to it more in the past when I was assistant chaplain to, our chaplains like Father Micheál McGavigan, Father Michael McCaughey, Father Thomas Canning, even going back as far as Father Kieran Devlin, and back even to Archbishop Eamon Martin. So I've always had a hand in school chaplaincy and in the spiritual life of the school, and I think it's an absolutely important part of school life. It's not the only part. We in St. Columbs College, we really believe in a holistic education, educating the whole child, so morally, academically, spiritually, socially, aesthetically, and physically. But that spiritual dimension, as far as I'm concerned, is probably for me actually the most important dimension. And I think St. Teresa of Calcutta tried to warn us about this quite some time ago when she said, in the West, you can be materially affluent, but you can be spiritually bankrupt. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why a lot of our young people do struggle with issues around identity and mental health, and not only young people,
That famous phrase, Western or consumer society gives us the means by which to live, but not a meaning for which to live.
Yeah, I think anyone who's involved in the work of teaching nowadays knows that mental health and spiritual health are things that are becoming definitely more prominent and more pressing issues, especially at the minute, again, with this period of lockdown and pandemic. I think that a lot of the fears that people normally try and cope with, a lot of the anxieties, are now exacerbated. And I think a lot of people are actually struggling with their mental health. And I think that having a spiritual life gives our lives, a deeper level of meaning and purpose. And I think it's absolutely essential.
Yes, a spiritual life that says your life is valuable, not just because you're successful, but you are precious, you are of eternal beauty and value. Your actions have an eternal worth, are significant. You're not just a blob on the face of the universe of no value whatever, with no past and no future.
Yeah, I think for me the key phrase is, I died for you while you were a sinner. That Christ came not for the healthy but for the sick, not for the righteous but for sinners. So he comes particularly for those of us who are poor, maybe not materially, but spiritually and emotionally and mentally and other ways. And that was his central mission.
And I know you have a big commitment on an annual basis to bringing teenagers, boys and girls, out to Lourdes.
Yeah.
I think you find that very satisfying for you, but very important for the maturation of the young people.
Yeah, I have to mention two colleagues here, Mr. Martin McElveen, who's now retired, former colleague and good friend, and Mr. John Johnson. And the three of us have discussions about this quite often when we're in Lourdes. And I think it is very true to say that every time we go to Lourdes, we are absolutely astounded just by the earnestness of the young people. I think when they go to Lourdes, young people are given a license, like a kind of permission. They express their faith in a space where they feel safe.
Which isn't always the case at home.
It's not always the case at home, and I think a lot of our young people, we make the mistake, people of my generation make the mistake, and it's unfair actually, to say that the faith among young people is on the wane. It is absolutely not. In my experience as a teacher of RE and as an assistant chaplain in a school, and just in my work now in the senior management team, young people have a very strong but a very quiet faith. They don't like they wear it on their sleeve, but it is definitely there. And one of the reasons I think why it is there is very often because of the influence of grandparents. And that's something that I'm coming to recognise more in my work as a teacher, the central role that grandparents have in the lives of our young people. But to get back to your question, when they go to Lourdes, they have a freedom to express that faith. And I see young people, down at the grotto at night or lighting candles at the candelabras, and it's the earnestness. And Martin McElveen, John Johnson and myself often comment on it, that the press sometimes that our young people get it's not fair, it's not warranted, because they do have a faith and it's very important to them.
And can behave themselves marvellously well.
Absolutely. They get so much out of giving of themselves, pushing people up and down to the grotto in the wheelchairs, being there for people. They get so much from that. I remember a few years ago a group of boys had been on a lads' holiday to Greece. And they came back from Greece and then they went on the Lourdes trip with us, and they got off the bus at Sainsbury's and they said, "Sir, that was the best experience I've ever had in my life." And I said, "Even better than Greece?" And they said, "Definitely better than Greece." So it just shows you that our young people are still searching for that authentic, for that real, for that genuine experience in life, which they don't always get.
And then this experience of a universal church with young people from different nationalities will be there at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that young people are up for that, and I think they're very enthusiastic about it, and it shows that they are outward looking. They are not what we sometimes assume they are, which is totally egocentric. They're not that at all. They are actually outward looking, and they do care about people in their local community, about people nationally and internationally and globally. And that opportunity in Lourdes gives them, the chance to meet people from all quarters of the globe, basically, and they really enjoy that.
And there's learning there. And obviously you're an enthusiastic teacher, but they say that the best teachers are those who are consistently learners themselves. And I know you did a master's comparatively recently, an MA in Catholic School Leadership through St Mary's University in Twickenham. What was your motivation? Why did you take that on, and what did you get from it? Why was it important?
Well, first of all, my motivation, this might come as a bit of a surprise to you, Bishop Donal. I saw it advertised in a local parish bulletin, and I didn't give it a second thought, because I had already completed, further studies, and I felt I had spent long enough in formal education, and I felt that I was getting more just out of, my own personal reading, and I thought, why would I do more formal education? And then it was advertised, I think, in school. I think that our school principal, Finbar Madden, sent round an email communication from the Catechetical Centre, so kind of crossed my path again, but I certainly didn't give it more than 30 seconds thought. But then a colleague of mine, Stacey Beattie, who you probably have met, Stacey was in the first cohort, actually, from the Derry Diocese. They do the Masters. And as she was completing her assignments, she would bounce ideas off me, knowing that I had studied theology in the past. And so basically Stacey's to blame, I think, for me doing the Master, because that was the hook, in discussing various aspects of the assignments with her, and, documents from Vatican II. I mean, as I say, I had studied theology before, and it re-sparked the passion, because I actually quite enjoy studying theology. So from that then, and Stacey would often say to me, "Mark, this is right up your street, you should do it." And then I had met Therese a few times from the Catechetical Centre, and she also, so people started encouraging me to do it. And then two of my colleagues, Anne-Louise Kirby and Tony McGonigal, decided that they would do it, and I thought maybe this is the best time now, because you could go through the journey and share it with other people from your own school community, and that would make it, easier, and you could bounce ideas off them.
And you find it nourishing for yourself?
Yes, I found certain aspects of it, and I don't say this lightly, that they changed profoundly my attitude to particularly pupils and colleagues in the school. I mean, very simple things, I don't want to exaggerate this, but phrases from that course, to try and see Christ in every person that you encounter in the course of a school day. Like that's easy to say, but that's not that easy to do, when somebody accosts you in a corridor and wants to know why and etc. But to try and see Christ in every person you encounter, and to try to be Christ to every person you encounter, so that every encounter becomes an opportunity for love and hope and joy and peace and kindness. And that, I could see that the Masters actually changed my relationships with people on the ground in the school at that level, and I think that can only be a very positive thing.
Wonderful. That's a very personal testimony. What about your thesis? Did you have an interesting topic that you picked for that?
Yes, again, that was, I think, a bit providential, because in the very first module, which is Catholic church teaching and how Catholic education developed and the Catholic tradition from the time of John Baptiste de la Salle and Don Bosco right up to the current day. And as part of that whole journey of Catholic education, we were looking at Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI's speech that he made famously to the students at St Mary's College in Twickenham. And in that speech he said, a good school, this statement really struck me, He said, a good school provides a holistic or a rounded education for its pupils, but a good Catholic school helps all its students to become saints. And that was it. That was the title of my dissertation. A good Catholic school helps all its students to become saints, challenges and opportunities in the 21st century.
Mm-hmm. That's a profound topic. And obviously the environment in which Catholic education in Northern Ireland, for example, continues to exist. Yeah. It's challenging in its own way, and clearly you think that sort of leadership training is important if people are going to be leading schools in the future in a changing environment.
Yes, I think that there's a lot about Catholic education that's countercultural. You're very often swimming against the tide, but that's okay. Yeah. It's like stand for something or you'll fall for anything. Yeah. And it does definitely give you a toolkit and a set of values, but it also makes you, I think, more conscious of how a school can be driven by the market economy and market forces, which is not particularly a helpful thing. I mean, academic performance, high academic performance, which St Columbs College excels at, is a very important part of education. Nobody would argue with that. And it's a very important part of Catholic education. There's no contradiction in my mind between, high academic standards and high academic provision and Catholic education. But the biggest challenge I feel in a Catholic school today is balancing that with making sure that you absolutely look after the poor. They must be at the centre of any Catholic school, any Catholic community, and I mean those who are poor spiritually, mentally, aesthetically poor, socially poor in relationships, poor family backgrounds. Those youngsters must be at the very heart of a Catholic community, and we must cater for them. And I'm glad that we do that in St Columbs. It's one of our very, very strong points that we have an excellent pastoral provision. But it's not ministering to those poor, those new poor, as we call them nowadays, in a condescending or patronising way. And one of the things that really jumped out at me from doing the Masters is, we have to constantly be asking ourselves as leaders in a Catholic school, how can those new poor, those young people who are struggling, how can they evangelise us? As leaders in a Catholic school, what can we learn from them? And in order to do that, you really have to be open to listening to that boy, for example, who presents you with a headache as regards challenging behaviour. What can we learn from that boy? Because very often in a Catholic school where we're really focused on high academic achievement, it's that young lad that, whom Christ speaks to us through. It's through the poor, the spiritual poor, the intellectually poor, the emotionally poor. It's through those young people that Christ very often speaks to us in our Catholic communities, and we have to be prepared to listen to them and they put into practice what we learn from them. So it's not like we're ministering to them and I am here to help you, but they're there to instruct us about how we should run our Catholic schools if we're prepared to listen to them.
And obviously pupils notice how teachers and leaders in the school react to challenging situations. I mean, you're teaching not even the pupil that you're talking to, but others will see how you're reacting, and that is formative too, Mark.
Yes, I think witnessing in a Catholic school is very important. I mean, Paul VI said that, young people listen more to witnesses nowadays than they do to teachers. And if they do listen to teachers, it is because they are witnesses. So our conduct is far more important than what comes out of our mouth. What we preach and what we teach is not half as important as how we act and how we are in the classroom. I mean, as Parker J. Palmer famously said, you teach who you are. And in my experience, and I know teachers will be listening into this tonight, young people are very, very observant and very astute. So for an RE teacher in particular, if you're teaching about reconciliation in the classroom and 5 minutes later you're eating the head of a young person in the corridor, there's a disconnect there. And the word hypocrite can very quickly be employed. And young people will not let you away with that nowadays. They will hold you to account. So your conduct and your witness and your modelling to Christian values is really important. Now, I don't mean in an abstract way or in a cerebral, intellectual way. I mean, really being with people in their suffering, in the good times and in the bad times, and witnessing to Christian values. And people, I think people value that. And as you say, young people in a classroom situation, they see it. And that's the important thing.
And very often it's the ones who caused most trouble, whom you supported, are the ones who'll come back and be most grateful to you. Yes, even if your memory of them is of cheeky wee skitters.
Yes, I was just thinking about this as I prepared for this session this evening, Bishop Donal, and a lot of teachers in schools knock their head off a brick wall with some boys. At least that's what they feel they're doing. I can think of St. Columbs College, the teachers going the extra mile, bending over backwards, to help pupils, especially challenging pupils. I mean, they couldn't do more for them. And, upholding their dignity and their worth and their value, etc., etc. And sometimes in despair, you think, what's the point? But I have met pupils, as you rightly say, sometimes 10, sometimes 15, sometimes even 20 years later. And they will say to you, look, I know I give you a hard time, but I want you to know. And they will also say, I know you think that it was pointless, but I want you to know that everything you did for me may not have seemed obvious then, but it became very relevant to me. For example, when I got married and was raising my own children, I put the things that you taught me and the values that you instilled in me into practice then, years later.
You showed me that it worked.
Yes, that's it.
Mark, that's a great note to finish on. Thank you very much for talking about your own journey, your own passion for teaching RE, the importance that you believe having a spiritual life can be for young people facing many challenges, how the atmosphere of the school can be very formative, as well as what's formally happens, how relationships are important, and how the best teachers are those who keep learning. Mc Connellogue, thank you so much for being here this evening. God bless the work.
Thank you, Bishop Donal.